Hello YouTube, it's Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to my show, Sexism in Movies and TV, where I expose and rip apart the gynocentric and misandric trash on mostly Western TV. For the most part, the films and shows that are really guilty of bashing men and doing nothing else, in fact, these franchises almost take pride in it, well, they mostly come from either the United States or Canada. The positive male role models on Japanese TV are out in full display, unlike here in the United States, where most of them are either hidden away or covered up, never appear on screen, or are just 100% cucked to make the female Mary Sue characters look good by comparison. Which, for the record, if you have to make a male character look bad to make the Mary Sue female character look good, then she isn't a good character at all. Now, there are tons of reasons as to why I do this show. One of which is, well, it's kind of easy to assume the fact that shows and movies like the ones I attack in this series are responsible for the fact that both men and young boys in this day and age have such low self-esteem. And a newer reason that I mentioned is the fact that no good male role models are on TV anymore. And in movies, they basically get cucked to make the girl characters look good, which ties into the whole young men and boys have such low self-esteem issue that I brought up. Yes, because they are horrible characters. The men have to be made to look weak and or dumb to make these characters look good. And that's something I wanted to, bring up. And that's the fact that these girl power characters are all terrible role models. Well, on the other hand, all of the female characters who could be seen as good role models for girls are usually, limited to anime for the most part. Most fictional characters that girls see on TV that they would want to emulate are basically horrible characters. Not saying they're horribly written, I'm just saying they're horrible people. And outside of some of these characters, a lot of little girls want to grow up to become pop stars, and that is an occupation that requires whoever's doing the job to dress like a prostitute. And haven't given you reasons as to why I do this show, which amounts to the fact that feminist Hollywood will hurt everyone. The episode will now begin. Picture this. A knight in shining armor riding off to rescue some random bitch who was kidnapped by a dragon. If you're a boy or a man and you currently feel the urge to Ralph because you live in the 21st century, you're not alone. There are always gonna be idiots with opinions, and despite what you hear from mental cases and really stupid people, not anyone can be a hero. It takes certain qualities, as well as certain action. And believe me when I say, one of the reasons why my high school years were so fucked up was because I literally had to deal with a male Karen who would not let that fact go. Being a hero meant I was successful, and the successful atheist was his worst nightmare, because it revealed that everything the priests told him was one massive lie. He wasn't special at all. The only thing special about him was how much of a loser he was. Okay, back on track. The characters I'm going to discuss in this video could have worked in the Middle Ages, but here's the thing. The characters I'm about to bring up in this video could only work in the Middle Ages. They could not work as heroes in modern day. They could work well as villains or as entitled and or egocentric rivals to a main character who would be an extreme badass, but they don't work as heroes. If anything, they work better as entitled or egotistical jerks who shoot their big mouths off until the hero punches him out, even though they implied that the hero was somehow less of a man, or not a hero at all, for more or less not being a knight in shining armor. I mean, the guy the White Knight character talks down to could be an anti-hero who's a bounty hunter, a vampire, a god of war, or my favorite type of anti-hero, a hitman, badass half-vampire, a pharaoh, a samurai, a ninja, associated with hell in any way, or associated with death in any way, or being an embodiment of death in any way. A delinquent, a shonen protagonist, which is why Kuwabara would have never worked as Yu Yu Hakusho's main character, and was relegated down to the role of sidekick. The god of death, or Shinigami, the Grim Reaper, or being a demon. having a stupid honor code or being chivalrous all the time and not letting women walk all over him. Especially that one. White knight characters will bend over backwards for their crush, and in an ironic twist, they make themselves less appealing, where our badass main character looks way more appealing in this woman's eyes. And in this video, I want to discuss some white knight characters and why they don't work. They'd work in the Dark Ages, but they don't work on TV or in movies. The male leads in any Disney princess movie. Yeah, it's kind of obvious that if you've seen one of Disney's princess movies, you've seen them all. And these losers right here only exist to be over-glorified bodyguards or to spoil the princess rotten because she's the main character of the movie. In fact, I hate these characters so goddamn much that I am filming this video with my eyes closed so I don't have to look at them. Their only reason for existing is to rescue the princess, marry the princess, spoil the princess rotten off screen after the movie ends, and they have no personality. I really hate these chumps. Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. I gotta say, without a doubt, this guy is basically an asshole. A white knight character taken to its logical extreme. He's prejudiced. It would not surprise me if he was racist. And he's basically controlled by his heart, which is his ultimate weakness. He thinks with his dick, and it causes way more problems than it solves. In episode 24, one of the villains that Yusuke fought was a man in drag. And because Kuwabara thought that Yusuke punched a woman, he instantly was going to pick a fight with him. In all fairness, this could easily be seen as switching sides. And if he did this in the Dark Tournament, which I will bring up his actions there next, it would have been grounds to see this asshole as a traitor. In the Dark Tournament, Kuwabara has a chance to impress his crush. And it was in a situation where most of Team Urameshi was trapped, and he was the only one who was allowed to fight, but outside the enemy's trap, and he insists on going out just to impress his crush. And I really gotta say, Genkai's scenario of hypothetically them losing and Yusuke and Hiei going on a rampage would not be the terrible thing that Kuwabara thinks it is. In this scenario, they would technically have a chance to murder Toguro before he got to full power. If they managed to use the chance of him not fighting Yusuke to draw him out, they could easily kill Toguro if all 4 members of Team Urameshi jumped into the fight. and hit him with everything they had, all their rage, before he reaches full power. And for the record, they all know what's on the line if Yusuke does not fight Toguro in the Dark Tournament. So, in order to impress his crush, Kuwabara is willing to gamble the lives of everyone on Team Urameshi and everyone associated with them, including said crush. This guy's words show just how much of an asshole he really is. And I'm pretty sure the writers of Yu Yu Hakusho knew that, which is why after this storyline, they had Kuwabara beaten up and humiliated whenever possible. And it was so satisfying just to watch. I gotta say, when someone says to me, if you do that, you're no better than them, you have no idea how much respect I will lose for that person or for that fictional character. Kuwabara's White Knight Honor Code is more or less just this massive joke. In a weird way, before the completion of the Dark Tournament, Yu Yu Hakusho's magnum opus, Kuwabara was more or less Finn Mertz from Adventure Time, but played completely straight. Until the writers realized the kind of character that this was, and started humiliating him at every possible opportunity. Yeah, when you're so chivalrous that you will gamble the lives of your friends and family on a one-on-one fist fight just to impress your crush, I just gotta say, you are an asshole who deserves to get the shit kicked out of you, and then see your crush murdered while you're forced to watch helplessly and can't do jack or shit about it. And while you're at it, someone like that deserves to see their friends and family die as well, knowing that they could have done something, but were too weak and powerless to protect them. Prince Seigi from Gokudu. In all fairness, yeah. The guy kinda disgusts me. He's chivalrous and completely out of date. He's in the beginning of the story and the end of the story, but in all fairness, to be blunt, yeah, Gokudu's the main character, and Seigi plays no part in it, despite being in the first saga. He only shows up at the end. Outside of that, his only other appearance on the show is more or less to be the ideal fairy tale prince who solely exists to give his wife everything she wants, be a complete doormat when it comes to what she wants, and punish Gokudu for the one crime he didn't commit. Now, watching Gokudu, I always got the impression that it was a parody of the anime Slayers, and yeah, if Seigi was a rival to Gokudu and was more or less someone he interacted with for more than 7-8 episodes, the character could work. The backstory is that he and Gokudu were originally one being who were separated into two, good and evil. Gokudu was the very first evil hero, and he existed long before the Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetype of the same name, by at least 10 or 11 years. And if they did interact, it could work if Gokudu was a jerk, but Prince Seigi thinks it would be better for everyone if he molded Gokudu in his image, something that he'd probably try if they had interacted more, and it would be an action that would drive Gokudu to more and more extremes, i.e., the more he gets pushed, the worse he's gonna act, and the worse crimes he's gonna commit. But in the end, all we got is a sickeningly sweet, not Disney prince. I'm so disgusted by this character, who could have been better, and when I say that I mean he could have been written better, that I'm closing my eyes as I'm filming this portion of the video. Superman. And I already know what you're thinking. Superman isn't a white knight character. He's a superhero. He would never subscribe to an honor code that's only that in name only, and is secretly chivalry, pretending to be honor. He's a superhero. That's probably what you're thinking. Because he was willing to kill General Zod in Man of Steel. And because he killed the Joker in Injustice. Okay, Earth 12. The events of Kingdom Come. To point out whether or not a character is a white knight or not, is to pit him against a badass. In this scenario, Magog is that badass. Everything that happened in the events of Kingdom Come is Superman's fault, and Magog actually calls him out on it. After Magog killed the Joker, who had run amok and actually killed Lois Lane in that universe, surprisingly enough, Superman, instead of acting like a hero, sticks to the traditional White Knight honor code and demands that Magog be arrested. Magog was acquitted after being treated like a criminal even though he was a hero. He demanded a fight between him and Superman to determine who should be Metropolis's true hero. Now, does Superman give Magog that fight? Well, no. In fact, he does the least honorable thing that anyone could do in that scenario. Sticks to his White Knight honor code and runs off. Magog won the fight by default, and then, after 10 years, Superman actually has the gall to come back. In all fairness, since Magog never fought Superman and won the fight by default, he is Metropolis's hero. Superman left. He abandoned his city. He doesn't get to come back. And everything in this Elseworld story is Superman's fault. After coming out of retirement, Superman enters a relationship with Wonder Woman, but by no means does he more or less fight her in any way, even though her behavior is actually causing problems. Well, I was wrong when I said that everything was Superman's fault. Wonder Woman does contribute to a lot of problems in this story, but Superman was her enabler through all of it. I mean, they basically took a bunch of violent extremist heroes and a bunch of villains and locked them all up in a gulag and put them through psychological torture by means of Superman hologram. I mean, all it would take would be for one superhuman, like say Shazam, to punch the damn thing, and all of the metahumans would escape and go on a violent rampage. Superman fails to stop that. And he's always there to enable Wonder Woman, who at this point should be fully aware that she can't act the way she does in the world of man. The world of man is not the island of the goddamn Amazons, and she cannot behave this way here. She is overcompensating because the Amazons stripped her of her title, but yeah, no, she can't act this way here. She's been in America for at least 40 years. She should have learned by now that she can't act this way in the United States. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the guy who wrote this probably thinks that, well, wanted us to sympathize with this version of Wonder Woman. I sure as hell certainly don't. She's basically trying to overcompensate in the worst way possible, not really seeing the damage she's doing, and in all fairness, this is a version of Wonder Woman who, in a comic book that was written correctly, it would end with her being put in her place, or locked up in her own goddamn gulag. But no, since she's dating Superman in this comic, and is a strong, independent character, she gets to act like a complete asshole and get off the hook. Moving on, Earth 51 Superman. Basically, this is the version from the Justice League two-parter, A Better World. And believe me when I say, the guy's a megalomaniac. He has the White Knight ego in spades. All it took for him to be an authoritarian dictator was for Lex Luthor to point out one very crucial fact about Superman's hero status. And that's the fact that he needs a villain. And he pointed out that being a hero was so important to Superman that he nearly let the world get plunged into a war that could have destroyed it. And Lex Luthor was the cause of this war, and yeah, it is kind of Superman's fault for not killing him sooner, but he ends up doing so, and becomes a completely authoritarian villain. And I guarantee you that if anyone else on this list was told off by their enemy in a way that calls them out for their irresponsible douchebag behavior, they would respond in the exact same way. Okay, the version from the Snyderverse. In this reality, Superman is basically a criminal who saves the world from General Zod solely because the plot demands it. He stole some guy's clothes in one scene and more or less destroyed some truck in another scene because it belonged to some guy who was being a jerk. The only reason that Superman in that universe became Superman instead of, well, Brightburn is because the plot demanded it. He did kill General Zod, which makes his actions in the next movie completely hypocritical. Okay, Superman has a problem with Batman's actions in Batman v Superman. I'm just gonna say it. Superman is a complete fucking hypocrite in this movie. He is a villain. A lot of these retards say that Batman is the villain of the movie. Well, if he is a villain, then the same goes for Superman. Superman apparently has a problem with Batman branding the criminals of Gotham City, where he, 2 years prior, more or less killed General Zod in a one-on-one fight, and more or less committed a massive act of endangerment. Metropolis was not evacuated. Superman more or less put tons of people in danger while fighting General Zod, and this did not bother him. If anything, he was asked whether or not he would, go down the General Zod route in Man of Steel. And his response was, "I'm from Kansas. I'm as American as it gets." By that logic, Batman v Superman would have seen Superman go down the Overman route. In the 2020s, that's a line that has aged really poorly. More than obvious that Superman has a problem with Batman's methods. And a lot of people would call him a serial killer in this movie. But I'm just gonna state the obvious. If Batman is a serial killer in Batman v Superman, then Superman is essentially General Zod 2.0. No difference between the two of them. Because in the Nightmare timeline, it is heavily alluded that Superman joined Darkseid of his own free will. And that's kind of what makes him a simp and a white knight in this movie. He's so horny for Lois Lane that the minute she died, he decided that he would be the next General Zod. In the beginning of the movie, Lois Lane was about to be executed for a crime she actually committed because she got greedy chasing a story for her stupid journalism career, and yeah, Superman saved her and a lot of people got killed. Saving the damsel in distress, Superman committed both obstruction of justice and even more murder. Okay, Superman is having a negative reaction to Batman's newly adopted methods. But in the vast series of multiverses that is comic books, you do not show up to another hero's city and tell him how to be a vigilante. That is akin to to a fantasy series where one side is in the right, one side isn't, and the side who isn't in the right just shows up and says, "We don't agree with how you run your country. We think we could run it better. So we're just gonna attack your nation, enslave you all, and murder your king." Yeah, you know that big fight? The one every idiot on the internet won't shut up about? And because of the whole Martha controversy, Superman was the one who actually started it. Yes, Batman was in Metropolis. Yes, he did steal the kryptonite. But for all Superman knew, Batman was just beating up criminals like he always does. Superman started the fight. When he said, "Next time they shine that light in the sky, don't answer it," that was more or less Superman threatening Batman. I'm just gonna say it. In the DCEU, Clark Kent is a criminal. Superman is a villain in that reality. He smashed some guy's truck just for being a jerk, stole some random guy's clothes in Man of Steel. Like we previously covered, he nearly started a war to protect the woman he's horny for, like a white knight would. And he ripped the hood off the Batmobile. Yes, this guy is not a vigilante. In this universe, Superman is 100% criminal. The only reason General Zod was the villain instead of someone like Lex Luthor is because, well, they needed a planetary threat to make Superman look like a hero. Because if it was basically just Lex Luthor, in the eyes of everyone, including Batman, who already knew that this guy is evil, he would not look good in the public if he just beat up Lex Luthor. It would just basically come off as two villains who had a disagreement and are now fighting each other over it. Batman's motivations in this universe come from the fact that, well, Superman is not using his powers responsibly. He was there during the events of Man of Steel. Superman was putting tons of innocent lives in danger because apparently he couldn't have worked out a plan with the military to lure Zod away from his doomsday device so Superman could fight him in a desolate area where there'd be no casualty. Batman's resolve only grew stronger when he was given a glimpse into the future, i.e., a vision of the Nightmare timeline, where Superman more or less joined Darkseid and helped him more or less turn the world into a living hell. And I know there are going to be idiots in the comment section who are going to bring up the argument, "Oh, Superman fell to the anti-life equation because Lois died. It's not his fault. He was mind-controlled." No, he was not mind-controlled. It was recently stated that Superman joined Darkseid in the Nightmare timeline, all three versions of it, of his own free will. Because when you look at the Nightmare timeline's version of the Justice League, every person here has suffered the kind of loss that would make them susceptible to the anti-life equation. How could characters like Mira, who lost her husband Aquaman, the Flash, who failed at clearing his father's name, and Cyborg, who lost his father and mother, why would they be immune to the anti-life equation? Batman, it makes sense that he'd be immune. The guy's had over 25 years of rage-induced training, both mentally and physically. The guy's basically immune to all forms of mind control. So it makes sense that he'd be this timeline's main savior. And Superman was not mind controlled. The guy acted as a hero, but only because he was horny for Lois Lane. When she died, when she died, every urge within him to be a hero died with her. And the Kryptonian who teamed up with Darkseid to conquer the multiverse basically decided to show his home reality who he was on the inside. This is a very good depiction of the DCEU Superman. And when Superman threatened Batman, his resolve may have been complete, but yeah, Superman starts the fight. Well, he was the one who picked the fight, and did it in the most arrogant and white knight way possible, as in every word he said was dripping with his massive ego. So yeah, he deserved what he got. And now I'm just going to say that this version of Superman has another white knight quality, and that's no integrity whatsoever. This is shown when he allowed Lex Luthor to practically blackmail him by kidnapping Martha Kent and agreeing to fight Batman under those circumstances, essentially becoming Lex Luthor's attack dog. Just look at Man of Steel. If this version of Superman had any integrity, I'm just gonna say it. He would have saved Jonathan Kent's life. If keeping his mother alive was truly that important, that it would require Superman to do very horrid things, something that I will expand on, he would not give in to this kind of blackmail. Martha would be so disappointed. In fact, she might actually even hate him for it. A lot of people will say that, Martha was his only family, so he had to keep her alive. But my argument is that if family is your big argument, then why did he let his father die in the last movie? He was more than happy to conceal his powers and let Jonathan Kent die. What makes his mother so special? Because this guy is a gynocentric asshole who was raised by terrible parents. I know there are a lot of idiots who have tried rewriting Batman v Superman because they think they can do it better. But let me tell you what would have really happened from an in-universe perspective if Batman kills Superman. If Batman kills Superman, then, Batman will then go on to kill Lex Luthor and stop Doomsday from being released. Then he will go on to form the Justice League, and yeah, the whole thing will happen just like in the actual canon, but with no Superman. If you do need an extra member, there are tons of heroes who are active in the DCEU, or Batman could even come up with the idea of sicking sicking Doomsday on Steppenwolf like an attack dog. Maybe even we'd even get an ending where Doomsday kills Darkseid. But either way, Superman's death is for the greater good. The Nightmare timeline will not happen under any circumstances. No Superman to be turned evil. Darkseid would have no allies, and the Justice League would kill him. If Superman kills Batman, well, this is happening the way Luthor wanted it to, so the entire world would see that Superman killed another hero. He went to another hero's city, killed him, and in the months to follow, Superman would go to other cities, killing off their heroes, and anyone else on Lex Luthor's hit list. As time would go on, Superman's body count would grow longer and longer, basically just to keep his mother safe. And that's something that White Knight characters kind of have in common. They put their horrible bitch mothers on pedestals. And Superman would have killed a bunch of innocent people. Some may have been criminals, some vigilantes, some guilty, some innocent. But it wouldn't make what Superman's doing okay. If anything, it would make his mother ashamed and actually hate him. But keeping her alive is his top priority. If Superman had killed Batman, he would have basically become everything the people in this movie said he was. In other words, he didn't deserve to redeem himself by fighting Doomsday. A better ending to this movie would have seen Batman kill Superman, save Martha Kent, and then go on to team up with Wonder Woman to kill Doomsday and form the Justice League. Because death is not the worst thing you can do to a White Knight character. When Finn was defeated by Rattleballs in a fair sword fight, he wanted the robot to kill him. And another thing that people don't really seem to realize about this movie that does put Superman in the White Knight category is that Lex Luthor was able to get the ultimate revenge. He took the one thing Superman wanted in his movie. His goal in this movie was defeating Batman and unmasking him and turning him into the GCPD. Even though with Superman that would have been a terrible idea, as Batman would have somehow pieced together Superman as Clark Kent, in an act of revenge, leaked his secret identity, and we would have gotten the Nightmare timeline regardless. But the point being, he couldn't do that, but defeating Batman was his goal. And you're probably wondering, how does this work? Well, usually the best way to get revenge on a White Knight is to find out what his goal is, and basically turn it into the last thing he would ever want. In this case, he took the title fight with Batman and turned it into something that would have permanently damned Superman in the eyes of the public. To the point where, okay, in Batman v Superman, we're supposed to see Batman as being in the wrong because he started branding criminals, showing that Batman is crossing the line into extremist territory. Batman only started taking extremist measures because the Joker killed Robin. Zack Snyder is obviously trying to go with themes of grief and what they can drive people to do. After losing Lois Lane, Superman instantly turns to villainy. This incel only saved the day because he was horny for Lois and wanted to have sex with her. The minute she died was the minute this universe's Superman showed the world his true nature when he was willing to work with or for Darkseid and help him enslave humanity. Showing that despite what Batman says or may have said in Justice League, Superman had no humanity. He was a monster. In turn, we have two heroes at odds with each other. One deals with his grief by taking more extreme measures. After 20 years of his measures not being effective enough and getting his sidekick killed. The other basically turns to genocide when the cunt that he wanted to have sex with got herself killed. Lois Lane in this movie is a greedy, good-for-nothing little bitch who nearly got herself executed trying to get a good scoop. Yeah, and finding out that Lex Luthor framed Superman is not a redemption. It's basically supporting a villain. And in nearly getting herself executed, like I constantly had been hammering in, Superman saved her and nearly started a war, which would have gotten a whole ton of people killed, because he couldn't stand the thought of the cunt that he wants to have sex with getting killed. And in the hypothetical future where it happens, he instantly turns to genocide. Between the two, it's a fight between an extremist and an asshole who's eventually going to commit an act of genocide and nearly wipe out the human race if he's not killed here and now. I don't know about you, but I would go with the extremist in a heartbeat. And you know that this version of Superman is clearly a villain, or at the least a douchebag, when the best thing he can do for the world, as seen in The Flash, is to not exist. Okay, the next character I want to talk about is Luca from Tai Chi Chasers. Now, this guy is the White Knight character done right. He is the rival character to Rai, our main character. Now, a common misconception about the rival is their alignment. They can be heroes, they can be villains, Their purpose in the story is to fight with the main character, more or less driving him to become stronger, and being one of the reasons that he doesn't stop training, and force him to improve himself or risk losing to his rival. No one really said that the rival character in any anime needed to be any specific alignment, but I really gotta say, Tai Chi Chasers handled it well. It's the one thing that this piece of crap did well. Making the White Knight character the villainous rival to the main character was a stroke of genius. Especially if the hero is someone like Vampire Hunter D, or Goku, or Naruto. A dynamic like that would definitely work. When they have their big fight of good versus evil, or a clash of ideologies. But for some reason, I just can't can't help but think that there may be some places in the world that wouldn't be okay with a show that villainizes the idealized knight in shining armor. This sort of dynamic works, especially if it's with the characters I mentioned previously. And if you want, and I can even expand on that by saying it would also work well with Yusuke Urameshi, Monkey D. Luffy, the Guyver, the Reaper from Darker Than Black, Gokudou, Blackjack, Ape-Man, any shonen protagonist, really. Or this dynamic could work in any show with a male lead who's doing the fighting that would have been made after 2006. If anyone did that, it would probably be a hit if the main character who beats up the White Knight rival is likable. Especially if it's something that our main character, MRA hero, is willing to use to degrade this guy. Basically labeling him a doormat and telling him, oh, you're just a loser who will do anything a girl asks you to because you're a piece of crap and you follow a code of chivalry that's out of date. You say it's your honor code, but there's nothing honorable about it, or you. He's basically a sensitive, emotional mess who spends most of the series pining after Princess Bubblegum, more or less following her around like a lovesick puppy, trying to get at least the barest minimum of affection. I really gotta say, this guy goes beyond White Knight. This guy is a goddamn incel, in every sense of the word. Finn from Adventure Time. When this incel first met Marceline, the only reason a fight didn't break out is because she's physically attractive. And this is something the show itself actually points out. And if the episode Hunchman didn't prove that Finn is not a hero whatsoever, I don't know what will. Even though it was one of those Adventure Time episodes that tries to follow some kind of logic and fails in a spectacular manner. Marceline even makes fun of Finn's honor code, something that tons, well, if not all White Knight characters have, but she kind of comes off in the right. Finn made a Faustian bargain because he was listening to his heart, and his stupid White Knight honor code, and yeah, if the whole thing wasn't a prank, Finn's code of honor could have led to a lot of people getting hurt or worse. Because we all know that if it was Marshall Lee and not Marceline who did this, the episode would end with Marshall Lee either getting burned to death by the sun, or with his head chopped off and his head crammed filled with garlic. The only relationship we ever see this incel have pretty much just ends with him nearly getting her killed. And I am completely in the right when I call Finn an incel, because that's exactly what he is. He wanted to date Princess Bubblegum, he wanted to marry her, he wanted to have kids with her, but the minute it was obvious that that wasn't going to happen, he basically gains incel status and degenerates into an emotional wreck. And despite what you think, he never really got over this until he found out she was a lesbian. I can only assume in the finale that I didn't watch because I stopped caring at that point, or sometime off screen. And based on the way that the episode this image is from, I'm pretty sure that the writers actually did intend for Finn to be with Bubblegum. Before the falling out with Cartoon Network, Penn Ward even acknowledged, he referred to Princess Bubblegum as Finn's love interest when he called Flame Princess his new love interest. So it's clear they were meant to end up together until until Penn Ward had his falling out with Cartoon Network, and then just made Bubblegum and Marceline a gay couple, something that backfired in his face. Because say what you will about Cartoon Network, and people were saying a lot around that time. They were saying that Teen Titans Go was destroying them, but they took Penn Ward's middle finger, directed at them, and turned it into something that they actually could profit off of. And I respect them for that. But enough about Cartoon Network's cleverness. Back to the incel who actually thinks he's some kind of hero. And Finn more or less proves that his honor code from Season 1 that Marceline made fun of him for having was indeed a load of crap, because he does get into a fight with a woman, something Finn would normally never do because he's a chivalrous White Knight gentleman. Morticai from the regular show. This guy is just a simp. He will bend over backwards for Margaret here, it is really hard to tell whether or not she was interested in dating him at any point. Morticai tried everything he could to get her attention. The parody of Axe body spray, forcing Rigby to go on a date with her friend so they could double date. Having a game night, bending over backwards, drinking coffee to stay awake so he could sit through some lame concert, even though he admits that girls only go to those things if they have a boyfriend, which she did. And he comes off as insanely entitled in that episode because he basically just expected her to be there waiting for him, to not have a boyfriend, even though he said women only go to those things if they have a boyfriend. He assumed that this guy didn't exist. And when she finally goes to college and she left a sweater behind, he bends over backwards to return it to her, even though it was obvious that she wasn't interested in him, even though he bent over backwards to make a good impression with her parents. And basically he degenerates into a pathetic ball of sadness when he finds out she's completely moved on, almost forgot about him entirely, and got a new boyfriend. It's more than obvious that if Morticai and Rigby had a favorite movie, it would have been Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Because the brain is wired in a way where it categorizes the people around you into certain roles, even if only on a subconscious level. Subconsciously, Morticai views himself as Scott Pilgrim, the socially inept loser, i.e. future incel, who can't get a girl, and will bend over backwards for her, and she'll eventually fall for him, despite the fact that all of his attempts to win her over would never work, and it's more or less a matter of his entitlement to her that is more or less the problem. Because when you think about it, the scenarios are almost identical. The only difference is that, well, Scott Pilgrim ends up with Ramona Flowers, even though in reality, this would never happen. A socially inept loser who's almost an incel actually getting the affection of the girl he's practically harassing to force her to spend time with him. So anyways, here's what I'm saying. Morticai is more or less, well, his brain is subconsciously, categorizing the people around him like this. He's the main character, Rigby's his sidekick, Margaret is the love interest damsel in distress who he's destined to save from a guy who doesn't deserve her, and Benson and the guy that Margaret's currently dating are the two villains. He's a video game addict, and like all video game addicts, the guy has a really skewed perception of reality. And if so, it makes perfect sense that this would be their favorite movie. And Morticai definitely sees himself as Scott Pilgrim, and Margaret is Ramona Flowers, actually expecting her to fall into a relationship with him at the end of the day, and all he has to do is work hard enough. Even though a scenario like that would never happen, even on regular show, as the concept of Scott Pilgrim versus the world is completely unrealistic. The concept of this relationship is the film's suspension of disbelief. Scott dating Ramona is the movie's equivalent to the Force or the Dragon Balls. It would only happen in this fictional universe. Kylo Ren from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. This guy is definitely a white knight if ever I saw one. Not to mention a simp and a whiny little beta male. He killed his father over something that started because of his deranged uncle. But he didn't kill his mother when he had the chance, even though said deranged uncle came from her side of the family. He killed his boss over a woman who originally rejected him, and their romance was only shoehorned into the final film because the fans wanted it. He sacrifices himself to save her, even though Rey was a Mary Sue, and people all across the internet are saying she should have been the one to die. He should have killed Palpatine and redeemed himself. This guy's a white knight, a simp, a whiny little beta male. He is no replacement for Darth Vader. Darth Vader was an actual character. This guy is basically just an incel. Basically, and in a way, he's kind of what Finn Mertz from Adventure Time, another character on this list, would be if he had received training in the ways of the Force by Darth Sidious. The Prince from Trick Moon. Okay, I'm aware that this is just a pilot, and it's a pilot that Cartoon Network did not pick up, especially since this chump is not the hero. His younger brother Trick is the hero, and his younger sister Pocket acts as Trick's sidekick. And I did like the pilot. I'm gonna admit, yes, I liked it. The characters had a fun dynamic. This is on the list for the exact same reason that Luca from Tai Chi Chasers was on the list. And with a mix of why Gokadu was on the list. It works because it is a mix of both in a weird way, both Seigi and Luca to an extent. And ironically, okay, it works because this one guy, Sage, is working for the bad guy who sealed up the prince in the Moonstone, which is essentially the MacGuffin of the show. And his motivation for betraying them is ironically understandable and believable. I guarantee you, if I was stuck living in the shadow of the stereotypical, disgusting, sickeningly sweet Disney prince, I'd probably lash out too. The sarcasm in his voice says it all. He's tired of living in this guy's shadow and never really being seen as his equal. And that, I mean, the dynamic with Trick works because Trick's just a kid. He wants to look cool, and if this was made, I could definitely see an episode where Trick and Sage kind of realize that they're more alike because of, well, being seen as the prince's sidekicks, something that made Sage go AWOL, because they're not so different. And, yeah, there could be an episode, if this was ever made, about, Trick and Pocket are not guarding the Moonstone in the way that the prince would. He won't shut up about it, and, well, this drives Trick to more and more extremes, to the point where it actually ends up getting stolen. And, yeah, that wouldn't have happened if Prince Moron would have just kept his big mouth shut. And I really gotta say, an episode like that could more or less have Trick fight Sage with the realization that they're actually not that different. And the prince would have to learn the lesson that, yeah, living in his shadow is what made Sage turn against them. And if he doesn't shut up, he could drive his own brother to do the exact same thing. Especially since part of this episode is Trick and Pocket realizing that their brother can't tell them what to do anymore, which was a major highlight in what made the pilot good. That and the fact that it was written very well. I could easily see this being something that would appear on Max. Characters like the ones you're currently seeing on screen more or less became, well, they're becoming scarce on American TV. They're more or less being replaced with sensitive beta males and white knight cucks who set the worst example for a young boy that I could ever see possible. And here is where I'm ending the video. If there's anything you should take away from this, if you are a young boy or a man, it's don't be a white knight. Value yourself. Stand up for yourself. Do not bend over backwards for a girl. It'll always bite you in the ass, and it'll never work out. It'll just amount to self-hatred and disrespect. You won't respect yourself, she won't respect you, no one around you will respect you. In short, be a badass. Don't be a white knight.